Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you for having me. And I was thinking when I was preparing that anyone can have a say, and I feel very privileged and quite humbled to be standing here speaking. And I just hope that I can share just a little bit from my experience in working with young people as one of the educators of Together for Humanity. My background is a little bit twisted. I started out as an occupational therapist, and then I worked in a church for many years, and that just got me interested in peace building. So I completed my master's in peace and conflict studies last year, and I realized by thinking about my career that the thread through it all is a real belief in transformation, whether that's in a person, physically, psychologically, or spiritually, or interpersonal spaces and community. I believe that if we learn to understand each other, we can achieve healing and growth. The organization that I'm with, Together for Humanity, is a multi-faith and multicultural not-for-profit organization that works with schools and the communities to address issues that arise when people from diverse backgrounds share the same space, whether in a classroom, a neighborhood or city, or further. Issues such as racism, homophobia, religious discrimination, all forms of bias, prejudice, and stereotyping is what we try to address and just give space for to be talked about. So rather than explaining our approaches, our programs, and our projects, let me share what my work with Together for Humanity looks like. I have a table at the back, so if you're really interested in our programs and want to know more in depth what we do, please find me later on. So the topic for this wonderful day is all generations supporting peace and harmony. What a great conference theme, and what a fantastic reason for us to come together. I really love the structure of the sentence. It could have be worded differently. For example, how we can support all generations to achieve peace and harmony. And this would imply that we might try to find a solution, a framework, or at least a way to give all generations, young and old, and everyone in between, the knowledge and skills to build peaceful and harmonious communities. But worded this way, we are encouraged to be curious, to listen and to learn from all generations. But when I read the theme, I also couldn't help wondering what we mean when we say peace and harmony. Is harmony the end result, where there's resonance and joy, celebration and sharing with other entities and peace, as Cora defines it online? Or do we sometimes create harmony, some form of getting along, but in doing so cover up or suppress what goes on underneath? I couldn't help but wonder, what about conflict? As one of the educators from Together for Humanity, I have the privilege to spend a lot of time with students, as well as our team of diverse young facilitators. And in my work with schools, I see that many school communities make a concerted effort to build inclusive environments through Harmony Day, NIDOC Week, and other cultural festivals. They give students from diverse backgrounds the opportunity to share and celebrate their culture, often through food, music, and dance. These are beautiful events, but I often wonder about the impact they have on the students on a deeper level. Do they go beyond superficial curiosity and create understanding? Are the efforts paying off? And are we creating more peace and harmony through these events? Students' behavior is often managed through rules. They are told what to say and what to do, and what to not say and what to not do. And if they don't get it right, the consequences are often punitive, detention, suspension, and more rules. Again, I wonder whether peace and harmony are achieved through these measures, whether we are seeing real change by creating stronger, sometimes seemingly unrelated consequences. When my daughter, who's now 18, was in grade 1, she got in trouble for getting a group of kids to throw wet toilet paper against the toilet ceiling at school. She was told to go home and tell me about it, which she sheepishly did. On investigating what was going on in her young mind and assuring her that she wasn't in trouble, that I was just curious, she burst out saying, "There are just so many rules and they don't make sense. No running on concrete, no hat, no play, no eating under that tree. She just didn't understand. In high schools, issues such as bullying, racism, and other forms of discrimination are often managed through policies. Granted, this is an important piece of the puzzle when managing unacceptable behavior, but the policies alone are unlikely to impact the individuals or group to such an extent that lasting change is achieved. When I was 16, I put a poster on my wall. It was not of a movie star. It was a black and white photo of Albert Einstein with one of his quotes, "Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding." If you have ever been punished without being asked what actually happened from your perspective, or being told to say sorry or forgive while you were still angry, you probably still remember how you felt. I'm pretty sure you didn't feel understood, and perhaps you changed your behavior, but it's questionable whether you understood why that was necessary. But if peace can be only achieved by understanding, how do we do that? A few years ago, I became aware of an incident at a local high school. A group of boys had reenacted the George Floyd murder and, without much thought behind it, posted the video they made on social media. Even though they had done this in their private time, a news outlet reported this and linked the boys to the school. The school, of course, went into media management mode and parent management mode and student management mode, as per policy. And all students were assembled and told that they were not racist, so this behavior was obviously unacceptable. The boys were suspended for 2 weeks. It was at this point that I became aware of the situation, and I reached out to the chaplain to find out whether we could offer any support. I saw two issues. One, the whole student cohort was outraged about how the incident was managed, and the principal was ridiculed. And two, the suspension of the boys would not change anything unless they were supported through the process. After conversation with the principal, who was receiving angry emails from students who were asking for better process and a change in school culture, I was invited to facilitate a student voice group and given an opportunity to speak with the boys when they returned from suspension. I met with the students who chose to be part of the voice group about 4 times over the course of 2 terms. This alone was significant for them, as they had expected to be listened to in a tokenistic manner. But when we continued to meet, even after the holidays, they started trusting the process and provided some very valuable insights about what was going on in the school. They raised racism and homophobia as the main forms of discrimination and bullying and suggested ways in which these could be addressed. They challenged the principal to engage deeply with their students rather than addressing them in large assemblies, making sweeping statements about good choices and creating an inclusive environment. They identified a need in the younger grades to raise awareness of issues around racism and homophobia. This was the word they used to describe all bias and discrimination towards the gender divergent students at the school. For the more senior grades, they suggested that students were upskilled and how these issues could be voiced in a more respectful way. They also mentioned that it was really necessary to include the staff and the teachers in the training. The school did a survey which backed up the claim that it was perceived as having a racist and homophobic culture, both by students and staff. The leadership welcomed the Together for Humanity support, and over the next couple of years, we addressed these issues in a variety of programs for students and teacher professional development sessions for staff. I was really privileged to be able to spend time with the boys when they returned from suspension. I was interested in their motivation for making and posting the video, but more importantly, I was interested in who they are, what they were interested, what they liked and disliked about the school and society, and how they wanted to go forward. Most of them, as you can imagine, 16-year-old boys, most of them walked into the session with a bit of a passive-aggressive attitude, avoiding eye contact and seemingly wanting to get out of there as quickly as they could. They were used to being in trouble, and they were used to wait it out. They were not used to not being in trouble, but being encouraged and validated as people and asked for solutions to problems that others were saying they were part of. They had really interesting perspectives about justice and protests and questioned the motives of some who were avidly advocating for change. I learned so much from them. The school invited them to participate in a more in-depth program in which our team spent an hour a week with them to learn how to dialogue with those who are different from them. We had some very thought-provoking conversations in that time, and just recently, when I bumped into one of the boys, he acknowledged the value of the program and thanked me for it. This experience illustrates something about peace building that's quite significant. Conflict must be acknowledged, and the reasons for conflict have to be given room to rise to the surface. Inappropriate, negative, or dangerous behaviors are an indication of an underlying conflict and an invitation to lean in and search for understanding. And when we do, it's important to really listen, and it is important to stay. Had that school only executed their media and behavior management plan, it may not have gone on the very valuable journey of discovering what was going on underneath the surface. It may not have eventually hired a deputy principal who approaches these difficult issues with a restorative lens. The program the boys participated in is called CHAT. It's an intercultural and interfaith dialogue program designed by Scripture Union. Our Together for Humanity team is trained by SU, and we often deliver it in collaboration with the school's chaplain or youth support worker. The 8 sessions are designed to challenge bias and prejudice while teaching how to engage with those that are different from oneself through dialogue, communicating to understand. One of the sessions, my favorite, addresses conflict. We discuss what conflict is, from intrapersonal and interpersonal to larger conflicts such as war. One of the questions I like to ask the group is whether conflict is always negative, or whether it may sometimes be necessary to create conflict. We explore this a bit further doing an activity that's called, If I'm Totally Honest, I'm Not Okay With. We explain that when we raise issues in a respectful way, engaging with different views with the hope of achieving better understanding, conflict can be a very valuable tool to achieve change, to protect people. In the activity, we provide a sheet with example statements about what conflicting views may be. For example, there's one statement that says, if I'm totally honest, I'm not okay with Australia Day being celebrated on the 26th of January. In small groups, the students nominate a few of these statements that resonate with them and practice to dialogue respectfully if they don't agree with each other, asking questions to gain greater understanding. These are always really interesting conversations. The students are also invited to add any topics of their own, any issues they feel strongly with. In one of these groups, this session created a moment that I will probably never forget. The group consisted of about 8 students with diverse backgrounds and identities. One of them was a transgender teenage girl. When we discussed the value of stating what we feel strongly about, even if it is not the generally popular view, one of the participants, a girl as well, said, if I'm totally honest, I'm not okay with someone being a boy at the end of the school year and in the beginning of the next year, entering the girls' toilet as a girl. Silence. She and the trans girl sat opposite each other in our circle, and the tension was palpable. Was this an opportunity to jump in and shut it down, or lecture, or distract? Or was it an opportunity to allow this conflict to be voiced, values and fears to be explored, and perhaps greater understanding created? So my co-facilitator and I invited the two to dialogue about the issue in front of everyone. They discussed personal and social anxiety. The trans girl was given the opportunity to express how scary it was for her to enter that bathroom, and the other could voice how confusing it all was. All the while, the rest of us watched and listened. Where would this end? Would someone go home offended? But because they made a choice to stay respectful, they walked out of that session as allies of each other. 3 years later, I saw the trans girl. She hugged me and said, "Do you remember the toilet dialogue?" It impacted me so much. This example to me points to another aspect of peace building. Sometimes conflict can be created by naming those things that we're not okay with, as long as we do that with the goal of understanding each other. But not all conflict shows up through incidents like the George Floyd reenactment, or can be created through intentional and respectful dialogue. Many times it just pops up unexpectedly and we can find ourselves unprepared. This is a common dilemma and frustration voiced particularly by teachers, but I am sure all of us have found ourselves in situations where a comment by a friend or family member has caught us off guard. Unconscious bias, microaggressions, racist jokes, patronizing comments are all examples of cultural violence, which forms the basis for much conflict. When we run programs in schools, we have learned to pay attention to these, and when they arise, see them as an opportunity to invite dialogue and create space for learning and understanding. Just recently, my South Sudanese team member and I were facilitating a chat session with Year 7 students. One of them was wearing a Halloween mask, which consisted of a white face and straggly hair. We asked him to put it aside, but he insisted on wearing it. Another student, who shares a lot of bento with this one, said, "No, leave it on. I prefer it to seeing your face." General laughter was interrupted by a third student piping up, "Hey, that's racist," implying that the second one preferred the white face of the mask to the brown face of the student. What to do? Shut it down? Reprimand the student for making a racist comment? Ignore and ask them to pay attention to what we were discussing before? We decided to spend some time exploring what they were really thinking and what the intent of the comment was. We challenged the students to take the issue of racism seriously and asked the masked one whether he had perceived it as racist. He hadn't. And when the situation was resolved, the second one, quietly, without our prompting, just whispered an apology, which was accepted. So we pay attention and we create safe spaces to build relationships and take time to speak about difficult topics and address conflict as it arises. There are many more examples from moments like these that I have experienced when engaging with students. And as I reflect on them, realizing that peace building is a messy process when we allow conflict to rise, I want to finish with just a few do's and don'ts that help me when I'm in the thick of it. So don't put a lid on it. Conflict is hard, but understanding the reason behind it is really valuable. Don't expect that we're all the same and value the same things. Don't assume that you have more knowledge than the others, especially children and young people. Don't forget to apologize when you get it wrong, because you will. Don't tell people what to do, say, or think. Don't punch above your weight. Know your limits. Sometimes a situation is too difficult and you need to find help. But do take time with the person in front of you and do pay attention. Listen to understand rather than respond. Know that you may not know. Encourage critical thinking, and above all, build relationships, especially with those who are different from you. Through my work, I hope to make a small contribution to positive change, albeit not quite peace and harmony. And perhaps we can challenge each other to be less afraid of conflict by embracing it as an opportunity to engage with people to create better understanding.